Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1201A, and today's date is February 10th, 2017, and the title of the episode is, A New Report Projects the West Will Become the New Third World. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, today on the market, we see the market is just going up and up and up. And remember, this is not the gauge of how the economy is doing. Everything that is happening right now is in the background, and soon it's going to be in the foreground, and people are going to be absolutely shocked. And we can see out in Greece that things are rapidly falling apart. Greece is lashing out at the IMF. We see that the EU and the IMF, well, they're looking at Greece saying this is a tough situation right now. German Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble went on TV saying the only way Greece can get a haircut is if it leaves the Eurozone. At this point, yes, I think Greece should leave the Eurozone. I think all the countries should leave the Eurozone right now. And the IMF continually reiterates that Greece will not be able to make its payments. And Greece insists that the IMF is wrong. Well, what's happening here is there's a battle going on. And they know that if Greece receives more debt, there's going to be more austerity, and they will completely implode this country. Central banks don't want to implode the country. They want to keep them at a state where they're still functioning, they still can make some of the payments, but they need to sell off their assets. That's what the central banks really, really want. And this is what they do to every single country. And really think about this. The Greek unemployment right now is 23%, and they're telling us that it's recovering. This is not a recovery. I mean, youth unemployment is above 40%. This is nowhere near a recovery whatsoever, but we're seeing that things are not just getting worse out in Europe. Things are really breaking down here in the United States. And one of the things that we're looking at right now is the Midwest farm bubble. It is collapsing right now. Now, early in the week, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released its biannual report on farm incomes, and this paints a very, very bleak picture of the American farmer. In its first forecast for 2017, the USDA sees real farm cash receipts down 14% versus 2015 and 36% from the previous high set in 2012 because farm debt is soaring and leverage surges to all-time highs. This is a very terrible situation for the American farm. And what we're seeing right now is there's a deadly combination of rising input costs, lower grain prices, strong dollar, and excessive leverage will likely force many of the America's Midwest farmers completely out of business in 2017. And the U.S. farmers sowed the fewest acres of winter wheat this season in more than a century. American farmers' share of the global trade has fallen from 65% in the mid-70s to 30% today. Corn prices once varied year to year by less than $1 a bushel. Since 2006, they have shot up and dropped more than $4 a bushel. So where does this leave the American farmer? Well, real farm incomes in 2017 are expected to sink below 2010 levels, which represents a 36% decline. And this is completely awful. And this does not look good. And farm debt continually rises. And we can see that what's happening here is in every economic sector in the United States that we've been looking at, each one of them are deteriorating and imploding on themselves. Things are getting worse and worse. They're not getting better. And this is supposed to be the recovery. We see the student debt bubble. Well, there are major problems there. Now, of course, they make it seem like the debt bubble in the student loan market cannot pop. But when students cannot pay their student loans, remember, they can't declare bankruptcy. It's against the law. Clinton signed this into law. And it doesn't matter because if they can't pay, they can't pay. If they can't pay, guess what? The government's not receiving the funds. That's a complete destruction of the student loan market. And what we're seeing is delinquencies are going up. People who can't pay is going up. and it is getting worse and worse over time. It's not improving. We see that the world's largest container carrier had a huge loss. And this is gigantic. And this is AP Moller Maersk. And their loss is $2.67 billion in the fourth quarter, and a loss of $1.9 billion for the year of 2016. Its first annual loss since 2009. And at that time, shipping came to a standstill during the global financial crisis. And its second loss since World War II. And this is supposed to be the recovery. This is not a recovery. This economy, the global economy, has been built on an illusion. And what's happening right now, as we can see, the illusion is starting to rapidly fall apart. We saw it, as we looked at everything, we saw it started in retail, and it started to spread. More stores went out of business. They had to manipulate the unemployment market. GDP wasn't doing as well, so they started to manipulate that, where they went back in time to 1929. They reforecasted, added in research and development. They continually manipulated the numbers. They added in Obamacare expenses, and they completely manipulated all that, but they couldn't even get it above 3%. I mean, it was an average of like 1.5 or 1.8% or so. And retail continually deteriorated. Housing now is deteriorating. Prices are coming down. And we can see right now that things are rapidly falling apart. Tax receipts, as we know, they have been falling and declining over the years. The federal tax receipts, the state tax receipts, the same thing. So we know the unemployment numbers are not real. And I know that Trump has been out there and he's saying that these jobs are coming back to the United States. But what we're seeing right now is all the companies that promised that they were going to bring the jobs back, well, they're not. Rexnord Corp, the Milwaukee-based firm, which specializes in industrial products, well, it's still moving its factory to Mexico. 300 American workers, they're going to lose their jobs. General Motors, even though they said they're committed to invest $1 billion in U.S. plants and bring the jobs back here, well, guess what? Their plans to move to Mexico, still in the works. They're still doing it. Ford, the same thing. They're still moving to Mexico. They haven't switched their plans. Yes, they came out in public and said this is what we're doing. But beyond that, they're not doing it. Nucor, North Carolina steel producers, who employ over 20,000 people, intend to proceed with outsourcing production to Mexico. Even though the CEO, John Ferriola, has admitted they are watching the situation, and right now the plans are still to go to Mexico. And we can see right now, this was a publicity stunt by the corporations. Yes, Trump went in there. He spoke to them. Now, most likely he's probably speaking to them saying, listen, we know the economy's not doing well. Believe me, these corporations, they know what the economy's really doing. The top of the top, they know exactly what's going on here. They know that their sales aren't where they're supposed to be. Why do you think they're out there closing factories down, moving outside of the United States? Why do you think they're buying back their stocks? Why do you think they're laying off people? Why do you think they're trying to cut expenses? They know exactly what's going on. I mean, you really don't have to be a rocket scientist to look and say, okay, we just don't have the sales that we used to. Gee, I wonder why. I guess these unemployment numbers aren't real. They know what's going on. Now, most likely, this is for after the collapse, where they're going to try to rebuild America. And it's not for right now because there's nothing he can do with what's happening right now. It's completely impossible. Because who's still in control? The central bank. The central bank created all of this with the help of certain individuals in government. And like I said before, there is no reason to have a central bank. What benefit does it serve? It doesn't. Now, Trump he decided to call Xi Jinping, China's president, and he is going to honor the One China policy. And everyone looks at this and saying he's backtracking, he's giving in. But I think what he does is he tries to see how far he can get. And I think at this point he sees that the elite, those individuals behind the curtain who are unelected, they're trying to push him into some type of provocation with China. And he's looking at the situation saying, okay, we don't want to go to war. That's the last thing we want. So it looks like he's backing off right now because he sees what they are doing. But what we are seeing is that foreign governments, they are dumping U.S. treasuries as never before. And it's not just China and Russia. Japan is doing it, and Saudi Arabia is doing it, and many other countries. They're continually dumping U.S. treasuries. And what's very interesting about all this, it really picked up right in the beginning of 2014. It started to drop, and then we had this dead cat bounce of where treasuries were purchased once again, and then boom. As soon as 2015 hit, they were dumping them like crazy. Now, something very interesting, where this is a recession alert, and we talked about many different indicators that are indicating that we are in a recession right now. In January, the U.S. Treasury brought in a total receipts of about $344 billion versus outlays of only $293 billion, resulting in a surplus of $51 billion. Substantially greater than the $40 billion that was expected. Now, the corporate media is out there, and they're making a really big deal about this, like, oh my God, look at this, we have a surplus, this is fantastic. Well, not as fantastic as it seems. Because what we see right now, the surplus, which is largely due to a law requiring the IRS to delay sending out tax refund checks to households claiming certain tax credits. That's why we saw this surplus. So for the fiscal year through January 31st, the total U.S. budget deficit was $157 billion and set to keep rising this year and for the foreseeable future. However, a more concerning data point emerges when looking at the annual change in the rolling 12-month total. This is the point where we find the following. For the period ended January 31st, total government receipts were $3.27 trillion. This number was 0.3% lower than the $3.28 trillion reported a year ago. Why is this important? Every time since at least 1970, when the government receipts have returned negative on an annual basis, the U.S. was on the cusp of a recession. The last time government receipts turned negative was in July of 2008, and they just turned negative now. This tells us we are headed towards a collapse. We're already in the recession. And we can see that the corporate media, the central bank, they are now playing up the narrative. We know that Mario Draghi said, listen, because of Trump policies, this might bring down the economy. He will be to blame for all of this. Now Fitch is out there, and they're saying, well, because of Trump and his administration and because of his economic policies, if there is a global economic crash, well, it will be blamed on Trump. He got rid of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He has these ridiculous economic policies that he's trying to push forward. And Fitch right now is sounding the alarm that, yes, Trump's economic policies are going to bring down the economy. They are setting up the narrative. Now, we know that there are many individuals out there like Charles Nenner, Cliff High, Harry Dent. They're all talking about something happening in the third quarter of this year, and they're all using different type of models to predict this. And we're already seeing the narrative of the story saying that if something should just happen, it's all Trump's fault. Now we're going to take this one step further here. PricewaterhouseCoopers put out a new report, and what they're talking about is how the West is going to become the new third world. Now, I had an interview with Bill Holter many months ago where we talked about how the United States would become a third world country. And now PricewaterhouseCoopers, they're putting out this report saying, yes, that if everything keeps going the way it's going, the West, the United States, will become a third world country. And this is what they said. The report takes a particular metric and simply projects into the future. The first world will no longer be first. Indeed, arguably, it will be no longer even be second. The economic forecast in the PwC report shows that the so-called first world on a steady slide to third world status. And they're saying that other countries like Mexico, Indonesia, are likely to be larger than the UK, France, and other countries. So we can see what's happening right now. Things are rapidly changing. Now, will they change on a dime? No. And the reason why they're all saying this is because they've been watching the real economy, not the stock market. They've been looking at the retail market. They're showing that it's sliding. They've been looking at the manufacturing here in the United States. They've been looking at the debt level. They're looking at who's going to be the reserve currency. And we know that China and Russia, they've been duplicating everything here in the West, and they're duplicating it to be active in the East, which is telling us that things are going to switch and change. Everything's going to be moved away. And the way of life that we've once known is going to change dramatically. Is it going to happen on a Monday? No, it's going to take time. But you will see the slide as we go through this. As the economy collapses, the recovery is not going to be like we've seen in the past. Most likely, according to Cliff High, we won't recover for 5 years. We're going to go through some pain to get things back on track. And by that time, guess what? The United States most likely will not be the reserve currency of the world. We don't even have manufacturing here. We are a service country. And once we stop becoming the reserve currency of the world, who are we servicing? Many people are going to be out of work. They won't have the funds. The value of the dollar is going to disappear. We're going to get a whole new currency. And it's not going to look good for America. This is what the central bank and all these individuals in government have done over the years. They have destroyed America. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.